Just a minute, sorry.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Cheers. Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, everyone. Can you just give us a few minutes? Welcome, firstly. Welcome to the Neville Alexander Building, Faculty of Education, School of Education, Faculty of Humanities, University of Cape Town. Yeah. Our guest will be coming down in about 5 minutes, so just be patient with us. We're trying to also get some more chairs in here. We have overflow rooms, one in 2B and then in 4A. Big problem with overflow rooms is they don't have the energy. So the question for me when I had to organize this was the health and safety rules. So I didn't want to put chairs in the room, but I am going to get some chairs from the upstairs, bring it in here, and if you're willing to have the chairs on the side, just be aware that we do have to always worry about health and safety. So we need to keep it at as much, at some space at least. So if those at the back want to come forward and we can get some chairs as well, that will be sorted. But I think we're going to try to get more people in the room because for me, a mass rally is a mass rally. This is energy.
You can hear, yeah, but I can't hear you. Testing 1, 2. Let me go.
Amandla! Amandla! Long live the spirit of the Palestinian people. Long live. Forward to a free Palestine. Forward. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience and for being here. My name's Lydia Cairncross, and thank you so much to the organizing committee for giving me the honor of co-chairing this with Zweli. I would like to welcome you all to this event on new forms of global left politics and Palestinian solidarity. This welcome is extended to everybody that's here, to the comrades, colleagues, friends, university academics and leadership, health workers, workers and citizens. And a very special welcome to our guests that have traveled from far away, to Mustafa, Jeremy, and Anis, who are here and have traveled many, many kilometers to be with us here today. Thank you and welcome. Having this gathering in the Neville Alexander Building has resonance, as Neville was a lifelong socialist organizer, a political thinker, and an organizer who always linked the South African struggle to the global struggles throughout the world, whether these be in Nicaragua, Mozambique, Cuba, Palestine, or Northern Ireland. When thinking about this afternoon's gathering, I wondered what it would be that we would like to see emerge from today. Last night, I listened to Yumna Al-Sayed, the Palestinian correspondent for Al Jazeera, describe for us the indescribable, brought to our listening the unbearable and unthinkable acts of state violence being perpetrated against the children and people of Gaza. And I listened to Mustafa speak the numbers into a new reality for us. He spoke of the 11% of the population of Gaza who have either been killed or wounded in the war crimes of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and collective punishment enacted on the Palestinian people. And Jeremy spoke to us about how weapons still continue to be sold to this death machine that enacts this violence. It was almost impossible to listen to, and one can only imagine what it is to live through it. But what struck me most was a reflection on why we in Cape Town here today, so far away from a people that is affected by this violence, are moved to gather here together. What brings us over and over to our marches and our pickets and our meetings? And I think it is our felt sense that the destruction of Palestine is not only about Palestine, nor is the struggle for the liberation of the people of Palestine only about their liberation. We do not engage in this solidarity only because of human compassion, though of course we are moved by human compassion. Nor is it an act of charity, though of course there is a component of that. But we are moved to the solidarity work because inextricably we feel that the liberation of the Palestinian people is deeply connected to the liberation of the oppressed peoples throughout the world. And the full liberation of the Palestinian people requires a shift of global and local political forces that are both absolutely necessary and also absolutely inconceivable at this moment in our political context. As is the full liberation of the world's people, both absolutely necessary and also absolutely difficult to conceive of in this moment. So I think for us, what Palestine brings to us and how it reignites our struggle is because we see the insanity of our global socio-political system starkly and brutally unfolding there in that small piece of land so far away. And even for those who try not to see and who try not to look, they can no longer see and not look. And this immense sacrifice by the Palestinian people is what is causing, in the words of Mustafa, an igniting of a revolution of solidarity throughout the world. So welcome everyone. May tonight bring us both political reflections as we draw the political lessons, incisive analysis, and also a way to keep our hearts open as we engage with the grief that we see playing out in these horrors, and find a way to transmute that grief over and over again into both anger, and conscious political action. Thank you.
I'm going to now introduce our first speaker. Jeremy Corbyn is a veteran anti-apartheid and anti-racism activist. He served as a member of parliament for Arlington North and joined the Labour Party in 1965. He became leader of the Labour Party and opposition between 2015 and 2020. He subsequently left Labour in 2024 and is now an independent MP. Colleagues, please welcome Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much for... Is that on? Yes, good. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's wonderful to be here today. And it's great we're having this meeting and this discussion about bringing together issues of Palestine, left politics, and how we go forward from there. And that, to me, is exactly what universities should be doing and should be saying. And it's very important to me that universities always have the freedom to explore different philosophies and different ideas. And so we get the creative development from all of us, which makes us all stronger as a result of it. So thank you so much for putting on this event today and inviting us here to talk about it. The issue of Palestine is obviously one that is central to all of our lives at the present time. And it's that I want to start by saying something about. The last 2 days have been dominated by the drama of Donald Trump and his wish to have what he calls a peace plan for Gaza, and the pressure that has been put on various people to support or agree to this particular plan. Historically, if you look at what Trump has done this week and the negotiations that have gone on, there were many pressures and many voices heard, but one was spectacularly missing. There were no Palestinian people or voices anywhere near the discussion that's going on or anywhere near the proposal for their future. This sort of reminds me of the grand days of the British Empire and the colonies, where the Sykes-Picot Agreement, secretly made between Britain and France, divided up the Middle East for the future. There was then the Balfour Declaration, which was a declaration in support of Zionism, interestingly opposed by the Jewish members of the British cabinet at the time, because they felt that giving in to the Zionist pressure at that time would increase anti-Semitism in Britain and all across Europe. How wise and right they were, but they were ignored, and instead the Balfour Declaration was pushed through. We then had the Mandate period and the constant oppression and suppression of Palestinian voices and nationalism throughout all that period. And so we've then had the occupation of Palestine to greater or lesser intensity ever since 1948. And we now have the unbelievably severe and awful occupation of the West Bank, and I'll come on to Gaza in a moment. Mustafa can tell you much better and much longer than me, because he lives there and has to endure it every day. But the idea that your whole life can be dominated by the vagaries of the behavior of a young soldier in a checkpoint about whether you can get to work, whether you can get to school, whether you can get to college, whether you can just move around in normal life, and it goes on for years and years and years. And that experience obviously makes people extremely angry. Gaza has been isolated from the West Bank quite effectively by Israel for a lot of the time. And after October 23, the bombardment of Gaza has continued non-stop. We're now 2 years into the bombardment of Gaza. And just to get an idea of the intensity of that bombardment, the total amount of explosive firepower that's been dropped on less than 2 million people in Gaza is greater than the power of the 2 nuclear weapons that were exploded over Japan in 1945. That is a measure of what the people of Gaza have had to endure. 60,000 known dead already. Thousands and thousands more will be there under the rubble. And so the suggestion that the way forward on the Trump plan is to set up some new administration which will administer Gaza in the way in which Trump wants it administered. And then we're going to have a British viceroy sent there in the form of Anthony Blair to be the sort of colonial governor of Gaza, as though that somehow or other the Palestinian people, for all their brilliance and all their genius, are incapable of deciding how to run Gaza, how to develop it, and how to take things forward. It is utterly absurd in historical perspectives, but in the reality of it is quite disgraceful and quite quite a hopeless scenario so far as the idea of long-term peace is concerned. Surely the fundamental has to be Israel must withdraw from Gaza, the West Bank, and the whole of the Jordan Valley. That has to be the fundamental basis of it. And so that is an important part of the campaigning that's gone on. Now, Israel hasn't done this on its own. It hasn't come from nowhere. Their military support from the United States, the endless supply of weapons, very high explosive, very sophisticated weapons, has been an important part of Israel's ability to continue the subjugation of the Palestinian people. Sadly, my own country, Britain, has played a very significant and very important part in this. Partly by the supply of weapons to Israel, partly for the diplomatic support it's constantly given to Israel, and partly because of the use of Royal Air Force bases in Cyprus at Dhekelia and Akrotiri, and also because of the supply chain of the F-35 jet, which has had such a devastating effect on Gaza. 15% of its components are made from various suppliers in Britain. The Palestine Solidarity movement has been massive and has been very effective at organising demonstrations and events in Britain, and we're organising what we hope will be the biggest ever demonstration for Palestine on October the 11th in London. So if you're in contact with anyone who can get anywhere near London on that day, please tell them, cancel whatever they're doing, forget the football match, forget the shopping, forget washing your hair, make your way to the demonstration and show your support for Palestine on that particular day. But we've also been challenging the issue of arms sales to Israel. And we've promoted a lot of activity and questioning about this. And through a project that I founded, the Peace and Justice Project, we held a 2-day tribunal into the supply of weapons and Britain's relationship with Israel in respect of Gaza. We did that because I tried a private member's bill in Parliament, which got through its first stage. It was blocked at the second stage. And so we said we'd set up our own tribunal and do it. And we had 29 expert witnesses who told us in excruciating detail what it was like as a surgeon to operate on a child with no antiseptic, no anaesthetic, and very few instruments or anything else, just trying to save life. They told us what it was like watching a child die of starvation when all of us know, in most cases, less than 10 or 20 kilometres away, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of water, plenty of medicine, plenty of everything that everybody needs. It's deliberate starvation and killing of children in order to maintain Israel's not just occupation of Gaza, but their attempt to remove the entire population of Gaza somewhere else in order to follow through the Trump plan. We took evidence also from a group called Forensic Architects, who originally were based at Goldsmiths University in London, and they're doing fantastic work. And indeed, they've done an awful lot exposing what happened in Namibia at the turn of the last century. But they turn their attention to what's happening in Gaza with very detailed examination of the overflying, the information that's collected, and the pattern of the bombardment of buildings in Gaza City, which fits in exactly with the Riviera plan for Gaza. And they exposed all of that. And so it was important to do that and give it as much publicity as we possibly can. And so the global movement for Palestine is quite remarkable and quite incredible. It's brought together a huge range and diversity of people. And it's also been an attack on the civil liberties of all of us in every country in the world, saying you can't talk about it, yours is a march of hate, they said, when we were trying to organise a march to go to the US Embassy. And they said it should be banned. And indeed, for a while, the then British government thought about banning it until the police apparently said to the Home Secretary, "That's all very well, Home Secretary, but what do you expect me to do when 1 million people turn up in London to take part in a demonstration?" At which point the Home Office went quiet and the demonstration went ahead. And I was very proud that we got just shy of 1 million people in front of the US Embassy on that occasion. And far from being a march of hate, it was a march of love and unity. Christians, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, people of no faith, very large block of Jewish people in support of Palestinians, Palestinian voices mounted by Jewish people. So do not allow people to paint us into a picture of something we're not. We're people who are determined in a human and humanitarian way to support the people of Palestine and assist them to decide their own future. Not Tony Blair, not Donald Trump, not Benjamin Netanyahu, but the Palestinian people being able to decide their future. That surely is the fundamental principle we should be adopting. And what the movement has also brought, which in some ways is even stronger than happened during your magnificent struggle against apartheid in South Africa. I was very much involved with the anti-apartheid movement from basically when I was at school. I was told by my mother the evils of what happened at Sharpeville in 1960, and from then on our family was part of the anti-apartheid movement for obvious reasons. We did get support. It wasn't always easy. To begin with, it was quite hard to explain to people what apartheid was. They said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You've got to come out against apartheid." "Yeah, but what is it?" You know, some people are a bit ignorant. We did our best. But the popularity and populism of the campaign, developed by the wonderful work done by people in exile and by trade union action, where we managed to do things like stopping investment in South Africa, making pension funds, particularly public sector pension funds, free from any investments in South African businesses, whilst the apartheid system maintained. They were doing exactly the same about Israeli businesses, and particularly Israeli arms manufacturers at the present time. And the union solidarity around the world is growing. It's growing, and I think we should absolutely say thank you to the magnificent efforts made by the dockers in Genoa and the Italian trade unions in general for all that they've done. All that they've done to expose all of this. And so you then bring together a combination of people who have a moral outrage about what's going on in Gaza now, as the same way there was a moral outrage at all that the people of South Africa went through during the ghastly years of apartheid, with organised labour around the world, which is the important point about socialist ideas and left politics. Is you cannot do it without organised labour. You cannot do it without the voice of the working class being part of that campaign and that struggle. And that is the important part that we have to ensure we develop. And so people come to politics from lots of different routes, sometimes out of personal conviction, sometimes out of family pressure, sometimes out of a lived experience where they feel they suddenly do have power because they've come together. And I had a beautiful experience about 6 weeks ago. I was on my way from London to Glasgow because we were doing some events there, including these music concerts we do called Music for the Many, which are about defending live music venues and giving an opportunity for new bands to be able to play. People come to politics from lots of routes. Don't dismiss music, don't dismiss art, don't dismiss poetry. It's all part of it. And I was invited by a group of workers to go and visit them at their place of work and their picket line. I said, sure, okay. So after I arrived in Glasgow, I walked over to past this enormous hotel called the Village Inn. Don't be fooled by the name, it's a huge place. Are you coming to tell me to stop or to take a picture? And as I'm walking towards it, there's 3 gentlemen in suits approach me and say, welcome to the Village Inn. I said, okay, fine, thank you. Nice to be here. He said, is there anything you wanted? I said, No. Have you come to stay with us? No. And then they introduced themselves as the group managing director, the senior managing director, the chief executive of God knows what. And I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." He said, "Is there any particular reason you're here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going over there to join the picket line of the people on strike." And I went over there, and it was a magical moment. They had been on strike for quite a while over wages, safety at work, conditions, and the fact that there were many of them on 0 hours contracts. So they didn't know what their wages were from one week to the other. And they had been in negotiations and they'd won every single one of their demands. They'd won them all. And then the leading shop steward got up to speak and explain how the victory had come about and what the determination was and what the unity was behind it. And she was a young woman of 19. And she told me afterwards that she didn't even know what a trade union was until she met somebody one night when she was talking about her awful working conditions. And from that, she became convinced of the power of unity of people. And so for trade unions to become stronger in our society, the majority of trade union membership around the world is sadly slightly older than the average age of the population, often heavily concentrated either in manufacturing industry or in the public sector, not concentrated in the areas where it needs to be concentrated: insecure workers, gig workers, young people who have no job security whatsoever. That isn't going to happen overnight. It happens by action. It happens by involvement. It happens by making the issues exciting and making people involved in them, because left politics isn't just about the discussion of ideas, it's about the practical development of them and bringing about those campaigns for real social justice within our society. And so that has been the theme of so much of, I think, what is beginning to happen around the world. But, and this is a big but, all across the world there's growing levels of social injustice and greater levels of economic inequality. I mean, Britain is not the poorest country in the world by a very, very long way. And I represent an inner city constituency, North London, near Finsbury Park, around that area. It's not wealthy. It is basically, everything is dominated by property values and property speculation, rent levels and everything else. And people there Thank you. Dominated by all of that. 15 years ago, there were no food banks. I didn't even know what a food bank was then. Now there are at least 12 food banks giving free food to people who cannot afford to feed their children or make ends meet. That is a product of 15 years of austerity, 15 years of accepting free market economic arguments that bring about greater injustice and poverty. And that's happening all over the Western world. It's happening all over every country in the world where inequality has grown on the altar of economic development, being that you develop inequality and somehow or other you get greater economic success. I find the idea that young people should leave school or college and then go into years of insecure work or total unemployment a quite appalling prospect. We've got to be able to run an economy that shares out the work, shares out the resources, and doesn't leave young people in the awful situation they're in. What we also have, and I'll finish on this, is the rise of the far right. The nationalist far right in all countries, but particularly effectively in the United States and much of Western Europe. The far right has risen on the basis that they've found a ready audience because refugees and migrants come and try and survive and try to get a living. They are then attacked by the far right as being the cause of all the economic problems. It's absolute bunkum and total nonsense. It's absolutely nothing to do with it. Poverty, inequality and underfunding of the health service is not caused by homeless, penniless migrants. It's caused by an economic system that keeps it that way and doesn't allow enough money to be spent on public services. And so, sadly, the conservative parties across Europe and in other parts of the world have conceded ground to the far right by moving in that direction. And disgracefully, so many social democratic parties around the world have started to adopt the same language of hate and nastiness towards people trying to survive in a desperately difficult world. So there's a gap there. There's a gap in political activity and political thinking. It's filled by people who are determined to do things by change. The Palestinian movement has actually educated a lot of people into other issues as well, just as the same way the anti-apartheid movement did. And so many of us are very determined to build a much stronger left alternative in our own country, hence the foundation of our new party, hence working with parties like De Linke and others across Europe. So there is this unified left voice, and that's what we need. Unified left voice where we share our experiences, share our ideas, share our triumphs, and commiserate with each other and understand our defeats when they happen. Because the only way we're going to bring about a safer, more sustainable, more peaceful world is by the unity of people all around the world to achieve it, including environmental sustainability and an end to the wars and nuclear weapons around the world. Just a few ideas I thought I'd share with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm going to move to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Mustafa Barghouti is a Palestinian doctor. He specialized in internal medicine and cardiology, and he's been deeply involved in the political struggle for Palestinian liberation through a number of formations, including the Palestinian Communist Party, the Palestinian People's Party, and he's a founder of the Palestinian National Initiative. This is a progressive alternative political movement within Palestine. He is also importantly the president of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which is an NGO that provides health services to peoples throughout the occupied territories. And I am sure you will agree after you've listened to him, he's a man of great depth who I think has seen a lot. And as a fellow medical doctor, it's been a great privilege to engage with him, and I hope you enjoy his input.
Thank you so much, and it's my pleasure to be here in South Africa again. I think I've been in this university once before, but we have much bigger crowd today. And here is the last news about a new poll in the United States of America by the New York Times, which has shown for the first time that 51% of American people think Israel should not be receiving military aid from the United States of America. That is one indicator of how the world is changing. And of course it should be changing. And of course I think the people of South Africa, as we expect, should be in solidarity with Palestine, because you more than anybody else in this world know what can be the impact of settler colonial systems. And you know better than anybody in the world what are the flaws of a system of discrimination and apartheid. And it wasn't a coincidence that Nelson Mandela said something you all know, of course, when South Africa got liberated from apartheid, that our freedom will not be complete till Palestinians are free. This is a case of justice. It's not an issue of nationalism. It's not an issue of patriotism. It's not an issue of one people being suffering only. It's about human justice. And it is true to say that the case of Palestine today is the most important human justice cause of the world today. I've been, of course, following what's happening in Palestine and in our country and in Gaza, all the period. And I must tell you that the suffering is beyond description. I know that you know already many figures, but it's very important to distinguish between knowing something and realizing it. When you talk about 65 to 70,000 people killed, including more than 20,000 children. When you talk about no less than 165,000 people injured by this Israeli bombardment. When you say 11% of the population of Gaza have been either killed or injured, and many of the injured will die, by the way, because there is no treatment for them in Gaza. That's 11% applied to South Africa. And you would be talking about 6 million people killed or injured within the course of 2 years. Apply it to the United States of Mr. Trump, and you will be talking about 33 million people either killed or injured in the course of 2 years. Can you imagine what the United States would have done if 1 million people were killed or injured? They probably would have destroyed the world. And then they blame us. They blame us for demanding justice. In the course of this terrible war crime that Israel is committing, because what Israel is doing is not one war crime, not two war crimes, 3 war crimes in parallel. The genocide, the collective punishment, including starvation of people, and the ethnic cleansing. In that course, they've already destroyed more than 92% of all homes and structures. And these homes were not always destroyed during war actions. They go and bombard purposefully after the fight is over, because they want to destroy everything. 94% of all hospitals have been attacked and bombarded. 252 journalists were killed. This is the largest number of journalists ever killed in any war. 1,723 of my colleagues, doctors, nurses, and other health professionals have also been killed in the course of this terrible atrocity. One of my colleagues, who's a lab technician, one of the workers of Palestinian Medical Relief Society, the organization that I'm very proud to be volunteering in, he left his home to get some food for his family. He came back to find that his house is not there anymore. His wife and his daughter were killed. His 3 sisters were killed. His 2 brothers were killed. And his mother was killed in one hit. But it's not the only case. 2,600, imagine, 2,614 families already in Gaza have been erased from the civil record, because everybody in these families have been killed. One colleague of mine from Al Jazeera told me that one of their correspondents among the 252 journalists that were killed, was killed, and they were looking for his family to pay his compensation. They couldn't find anybody because all his relatives have vanished too. More than 5,943 other families have been all erased to the ground and killed, except one member of the family that stayed alive. And you can imagine what would be the feeling of that little child who lost his father, his mother, his grandfather, his grandmother, his brothers, his sisters. These are the human issues that we should look at. And these are not just figures. These are people. What we face today is not only Zionist aggression, is not only Israeli occupation, is not only apartheid. What we face in Palestine is fascism. What they do to us is nothing but fascist behavior. And that is the reality. Netanyahu was proud the other day to mention in his press conference that 90% of the Israelis are against the establishment of a Palestinian state and that 90% of the Israelis support this genocidal war. What does that mean? And what does it mean when the Israeli opposition parties, when he hit Qatar and tried to kill the negotiating team, were all praising him and supporting this kind of attack? It's truly a very serious fascist situation. And it's not just Gaza. I live in the West Bank. I was born in Jerusalem. I worked as a medical doctor in one of the most important hospitals there for 15 years. And since 2005, I'm not allowed to enter Jerusalem. In the West Bank, we are now subjected to 1,000 military checkpoints. And it's not a big area, it's a small area, if you look at the map. 1,000 military checkpoints and 200 military gates that transform 200 communities into prisons. People cannot get in or out without Israeli army permission. 18,000 Palestinians in the West Bank were already arrested since October 7th. Everybody speaks about the Israeli captives, hostages, as they call them. I want them all to be released. And they can be released tomorrow if Israel accepts to stop the war. But nobody speaks about our hostages. Nobody speaks about the 14,000 Palestinian people in Israeli jails. Nobody speaks about the 400 children in jail who are also hostages, in my opinion. Why would you put a child in jail when he's just a child? Nobody speaks about the 3,600 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails today who are kept there without any legal process, without them knowing why they are in jail, because they call it administrative detention. They borrowed that from the British emergency law, which was cancelled in Britain. And nobody speaks about the 552 Palestinian bodies that are in prison too. Some have been withheld by Israel since 55 years. 33 of them were prisoners who died in jail because of lack of medical treatment. And now Israel says they will keep their bodies imprisoned till they finish their term. Who does that? A woman in Jenin camp who lost her child who was 15 years old. He was shot by the Israeli army in Jenin camp. She told me, all I want is a grave that I can cry on. How can this happen? And the big question, with all that is happening to us, why the world is allowing it? Why 11,000 sanctions on Russia in less than 2 months and not a single sanction on Israel for 77 years of ethnic cleansing and occupation and apartheid? In reality, Gaza exposed the world, exposed the flaws of our international system, exposed the double standards that we all suffer from. And it's not limited to Palestine. I'm sure there are so many people who are suffering in different parts of Africa, in Asia, and so many other places. And there is no justice. And that's the lesson we should take all from Gaza, that there is injustice in this world, and this injustice must be fought against, and it must be changed. What do we want? I mean, from you as the good people of South Africa. What I hope you can do is to help us change this balance of power, which is against justice. And we believe in a strategy to change the balance of power. You used to call it the pillars of struggle in South Africa, and we do believe we adopt a strategy of what we call 6 pillars of struggle. The first of which is resistance to injustice, using forms of struggle that are compatible with international law, of course. The second pillar is unity of Palestinians. The third pillar, and the most important one, is the steadfastness of the Palestinian people on their land. Our future, by the way, will depend totally on whether we stay in Palestine or don't leave Palestine. And that's why the biggest goal should be to prevent the ethnic cleansing of the people of Gaza. Why? Because what do we have in Palestine? We have 7.3 million Palestinians now, apart from the 7.5 million refugees who were displaced in 1948. And 7.2 or 7.1 million Jewish people. What do you do with that? The Palestinians officially accepted the two-state solution. Israel rejects that. We, in the first place, called for one-state solution, and I believe that this is the best solution, like the one you have. One democratic state with equal rights for everybody. And they also reject that. So what do they accept? Ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. This is their solution. And that's why steadfastness is one of the most important pillars. But there are other pillars, including unity of all Palestinians, whether they are in the diaspora, they are in 1948 areas, or in the occupied territories, West Bank and Gaza. And there is a fifth pillar, which is BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions against the system of apartheid in Palestine. Without that element and the element of international solidarity, we cannot change the balance of power. And that's why we call on you to enhance and increase the boycott, divestment, sanctions on this system of apartheid. And I talk here not only about kicking out or not having any ambassador that would defend this Israeli policy, but I'm talking about also economic sanctions. I don't think it makes any sense that Israel would be fed with South African coal, for instance. It doesn't make sense. And I think the boycott, divestment, sanctions is going on and is increasing. And we're talking about sport, culture, academic boycott in your case, because I am sure there should be boycott, academic boycott. And of course, medical boycott. Not because it's against Jewish or Israeli people. It's for their sake as well. Because the Israelis themselves will not be free unless we are free. That is the reality. And by the way, let me tell you, the Holocaust, the terrible Holocaust that happened to Jewish people in the Second World War, did not happen only because there were criminals like Hitler and other Nazis. It happened also because of the cowardness of so many Western politicians, and many of them were in Britain, by the way, like Chamberlain and others. And this cowardness is what allowed the Holocaust to happen to the Jewish people, because they were perceived as weak. But the same cowardness is happening now, allowing another Holocaust to the Palestinian people. And if you are if you are honest and decent against anti-Semitism, against the Holocaust that happened to Jewish people, if you are really honest and decent, you have to be against the Holocaust that is happening to Palestinians. There are so many questions that were raised. Maybe we will answer them during the discussion. But I want to tell you about the most recent recognitions that we got from some countries, like France, Britain, Canada, Australia. That's good. We welcome that. Why we welcome that? Because it affirms the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people, and it negates many of the Israeli laws that are discriminatory, like the state-nation law, which says that the right of self-determination on the land of historic Palestine is exclusive for Jewish people. That law, by the way, was passed before the 7th of October. And after the 7th of October, they passed another law which says, or a resolution that prevents the establishment of a Palestinian state. So these recognitions are welcome, but they are not enough. They are not enough because they will not change the course, and they will not change the balance of power. And if these countries want to be serious about implementing these recognitions, then they have to impose sanctions on this Israeli apartheid and occupation system. Without sanctions, we cannot speak about a change. There is a big question which I don't have time to answer. Maybe during the questions we can answer about this new Trump's plan. But the most important criticism of that plan is that it says nothing about ending occupation. They call it peace plan. Really? Peace? Without saying a word about occupation, without saying a word about ending this terrible injustice that we are subjected to, without allowing us to have a state of our own or any kind of self-determination. And I said that, and an anchor from BBC told me, yes, but in the point 19, there is something there. What is there? If the Palestinians behave well, and if they reform well, and if they do well, and if that is examined and they find that it is okay, maybe, not for sure, but maybe and maybe not, there will be a path to discussing self-determination. Give me a break. We had a path for 30 years with Oslo Agreement. And where did we end? We had 121,000 settlers, and now we have 850,000 settlers who, by the way, became the base of fascism in Israel, which is going to also destroy the Israeli society itself. I want to finish here, but I want to tell you one last thing. It's a promise that I said to other people yesterday in the evening here in South Africa. We, the Palestinian people, will never give up. Nothing in this world will break our resistance or our struggle or our insistence to achieve our freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barghouti. Our final speaker is Dr. Anis Daragma. Dr. Daragma holds a PhD in human geography and a postdoctoral degree in museum studies. He's a former curator and art director of the Palestine Museum of Cape Town, which he served between 2010 and 2015. He's currently the art director of the Institute for Palestine and South Africa from 2016 until the present. He's a member of the Al Ghazalia Group in Pretoria, and he's a committee member of Al Aqwa Group of Palestine since 2020. Dr. Daragma. Thank you.
Thank you, Zweli and Professor Lindy, for introducing me here. Afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here and to accompany Dr. Mustafa and Comrade Jeremy. While I accompany them since we arrived here, and I was writing a framework for an article, which I'm going to present. But while I'm writing the framework, it came to my mind another article. Is it what will happen if Dr. Mustafa become the president of Palestine and Jeremy become the prime minister of England? That for sure going to make a shift global wise and region wise. Yeah, the article that I'm planning or frame to write it is about colonial occupation in the West Bank post October 7, and the case of one province in the West Bank, which is my province, Tobas. It's a draft article, but the main framework of it say it's built on that poverty and struggle to afford food now in the West Bank is 43% compared to 223. 223 it was 28%. The unemployment now is 30%, while it was 18%. The unemployment and poverty increased, and also that's because of many reasons. Mainly, the labor market in Israel is closed for the Palestinians of the West Bank, and now they issue a military order. If they found a worker in Israel, a Palestinian worker in Israel, they could prison him 2 years, or they can deport him to Gaza and never come back from Gaza. And also, what caused it is what Dr. Mustafa spoke about. There's about 1,000 checkpoints for 613 towns. So almost each town has 2 gates. There's no other way to exit or to enter the town. For example, the travel between Nablus to Ramallah, which is the main city, let's say, in West Bank, it's usually about 55 minutes. Now it's at least 3 hours. Yeah, the travel from my town, Tobas, to the nearby settlement, which was about 20 minutes, where laborers, they go there, it's about 4 hours now. 4 hours. And that's all increase the level of poverty. People don't want to go to cross boundaries between the towns or to go out. And that also unemployment and poverty increase because the what you call the public sector only receive 40% of their salaries. Employment in Israel is almost dropped to 10%. The price of commodities increase. The price of a farming product decrease. You know, this all help or contribute to make poverty and unemployment peaks. And I did a little exercise while in my town. Each time I go, I'll ask 3 shops, how many beggars did come to you today? In average, one of the shops say it used to be like 5 beggars a day, now 35. You know, to drop that increase, it's quite a number. And then it's the question at the end of the day, what will come out from the article is what it means to live in the West Bank now. What it means. Time become longer, isn't it? Time become painful. Houses museumize death. In each house now, you'll find a poster of a martyr, of a family member or a neighbor. There's in each town, there's like a clan houses where the tribe have their house for condolences and wedding and engagement. In each house, in each of those houses, you'll find on the wall is the picture of the martyrs. So we museumizing death and martyrs, and we living it, and it's hard to be happy or to celebrate there because your neighbor has been killed a while ago. One of the figures that's like really shocked me is that the first intifada in my province, or what you call county in England, it was 12 young people were being killed. The second intifada, 15. From October until now is 110. It's a town of 50,000 people. It's not a lot, you know. I think with this, it's just a framework. This is my ideas which came to me, and I try to share with you. Oh, thank you for all that time.
Thank you very much, Anis. Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Jeremy. We have, is it an hour, Zweli? 45 minutes. We would like to have some conversation with comrades and friends in the room. So we're going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to ask, because they need to get to another engagement, that we keep the questions quite short, or comments. So if you can speak for a minute or two only. We're going to take a round of 3, get some responses, then take another round of 3. And we'll just sort of take 1 per person. So no sort of rebuttals. So, okay, I'm going to go with, is there someone who can take the mics around for us? Another one. Go ahead.
Thank you to all 3 speakers. My question is for Dr. Barghouti specifically. Both you and Mr. Corbyn have spoken about the importance of a unified people's movement, unified Palestinian movement. But we know that for decades, the Israeli government have done everything they can to prevent the unification of Palestinian leadership. And I know that you specifically have been involved in many initiatives to try and counteract that. And so the Israeli government says that if you negotiate with us, you can only negotiate and you can have no power. If you fight us, you can only fight, but you can have no legitimacy. And yet we have these figures such as, Khaled Mishal, who is a long-standing Hamas leader, who's clearly been in favor of negotiation at various points, and figures like Marwan Barghouti, a Fatah leader, who's clearly been in favor of armed resistance at points. And what Israel has done is they've tried to over and over kill Khaled Mishal, and they've kept Marwan Barghouti in prison. So my question is essentially around what are the latest developments in the work that you're doing to try and get this unified Palestinian leadership, and what can we do to support that work? Because if you look at the South Africa example, there was a campaign to free Nelson Mandela, which was widely supported around the world. And yes, we know these struggles aren't just about leaders, but if there were to be a campaign in this moment with this much mobilization around the world around, for example, freeing Marwan Barghouti, perhaps that would be very helpful. So my question is essentially, where are those unification attempts at, and what can we do to help?
Great, thank you so much. We'll take 2 more questions.
My question is to Jeremy. Jeremy, as a former, let me stand up. Here we go.
Oh, there you
are. As a former leader of Labour, and I would say myself as a naive observer who perhaps lived in England during the Blair era, what type of person are we actually dealing with if he becomes a viceroy? But from my perspective, he's like the living antichrist, as someone who would take over that role. It's not like you're only getting a bad actor, but like the worst possible actor with that history. And being a leader of the party and having known him, what type of character and person are we dealing with, just from a human to human perspective?
To Dr. Mustafa, and I think you can also go to Jeremy. I'm taking your bait. You said you will talk more about the peace plan that was presented. And so my question is, where does this end? The 7th of October is coming up. It's the 2nd year anniversary. We know this has been a struggle since 76 years. How does this end? Thank you.
All right, so who would like to start?
There was only one question for me, but the others are crucial. I just comment on the one about legitimacy and the question, Marwan Barghouti. As one who was involved in the anti-apartheid campaign from when I was in school, it became much easier to convince people of the justice of the cause when you could put names and faces to those in prison and things like that. So when we had demonstrations outside the embassy in London and so on, with pictures of people who were in prison or threatened with execution, or in some cases were executed, and then building the whole image around Nelson Mandela made it much easier to campaign. It became something tangible. And so I think it's never underestimate the importance of the personal in the story and the personal in the connection. It does matter a great deal. And I think the point about popularizing the struggle and the release of prisoners, Marwan Barghouti represents somebody who is absolutely the voice of Palestinian people, who's been most disgracefully treated and imprisoned for a very long time. And a campaign around his release has the effect of the rest of the world understanding the horror story of the lives of so many people who've wasted decades and decades in Israeli prisons, and including children being kept in those prisons. Israel likes to present itself as a modern democratic nation that fulfills all the norms of natural justice and everything else. It's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Just look at the numbers of people that are held on administrative detention with no access to any form of justice whatsoever. These things are exposed the more one can campaign around Marwan Barghouti. The point about Viceroy Blair, yeah, thanks. I've known Tony Blair for a very long time. We're not close.
I wouldn't be sitting with you.
We're not close and never have been. I've had dealings with Blair on lots of occasions, particularly over the Iraq War, and I've never forgotten the last meeting we had with Blair before the fateful decision was taken and the parliamentary vote happened, which ended with Britain participating in the Iraq War and the deaths of thousands and thousands of people. And I remember saying at the big rally in 2003, this war will solve nothing. It will create the wars of tomorrow, the hatred of tomorrow, the bitterness of tomorrow, and the terrorism of tomorrow. This war is about natural resources and about wealth and power. It's not about democracy and human rights. And we had about 6 or 8 of us as then Labour MPs who were very opposed to the war, had a meeting with Blair in his office in Parliament. And we sat around the table and he listened, I suppose, to the entreaties that were made by everybody. Then he said, okay, I've got time for one last contribution, but it better be short. So I put my hand up. So he sort of said exasperatedly, yes, Jeremy. And I said, Tony, why are we doing this? And then a hand came crashing down on the table. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And then he walked out of the room. Not prepared to engage, not prepared to debate. And that fateful war was built on the decision about Afghanistan and the whole George Bush war on terror stuff. And since he ceased to be Prime Minister, Blair has become an incredibly wealthy hired hand of the even more incredibly wealthy to promote global corporation mergers and everything else. And he should be nowhere near Gaza, nowhere near the Palestinian people, nowhere near this. It's only the Palestinian people who should be involved in the future of Gaza, not the West, not Blair, not the big business corporations. What we're seeing is the wealth that's been made by the arms manufacturers out of the bombardment of Gaza is then on show at international arms fairs all around the world where they demonstrate how drones work, how guided missiles work, how targeting works, how remote controlled devices fed by AI works. This is the Palestinian people being used as guinea pigs for the world's arms industry. It's got to stop. We need voices like Dr. Barghouti to be heard around the world.
I think I have two questions. The first is I will answer is about this whole thing that is called a peace plan. Well, as I mentioned, that plan that was declared does not mention a word about the rights of the Palestinian people to end occupation. By the way, the plan that was announced is different from the plan that Trump had agreed with the representatives of the Arab and Muslim countries. It's important for you to know that. And why is it different? Because Netanyahu changed it and dictated on Trump to change it. And that's why the statement that came from Arab countries, yes, it welcomed Trump's efforts and so on, but it detailed lots of issues that were omitted from that plan. Specifically about the Palestinian statehood, specifically about the unity between West Bank and Gaza, specifically about not separating Gaza from West Bank, etc., etc. So the map, the plan that was announced is very different from the original one. And that's exactly what I warned against, by the way. One day before Trump met with Netanyahu, I said, this man is capable of destroying anything, and he will manipulate Trump, and he did, and produced this terrible document. Why it's terrible? First of all, it is negotiated between the United States of America and Israel, and before that with some Arab countries, but never with any Palestinian. Not with Hamas, of course, not with even the Palestinian Authority. No Palestinian was even consulted about this. So it's a plan about us, but we are not in the discussion. Second, this plan gives hand to Netanyahu to reactivate the war whenever he wants after getting back his captives. What he said in the press conference and what is included in this plan gives him the right to decide if there is any violation that justifies reactivating the war. Third, the issue of Israeli withdrawal from Gaza is absolutely smashed, because now he's speaking about staying in Gaza, continuing the occupation of Gaza, without the responsibility of the occupying power towards the civilian population that are occupied by them, because that responsibility will be transferred to Mr. Blair, who should be funded by the Arab countries. And that's exactly what Netanyahu is trying to do. And fourth, it speaks about a foreign body that will be ruling our lives in Gaza and creating a different political and government system in Gaza from that in the West Bank, which means you are paving the road for absolute and long-term separation between Gaza and West Bank, which is Netanyahu's way of killing the possibility of a Palestinian independent state. And the same thing, I mean, you have to take that into consideration with the other parallel process that is happening in the West Bank, which is the expansion of Israeli illegal settlements. During the course of the last 2 years, Israel confiscated from the West Bank 16% of the land. Before that, by building the illegal apartheid wall, they confiscated another 16%. But in reality, the Israeli settler terrorists, which I didn't speak about, are moving around in the West Bank, attacking Palestinian communities, burning houses, burning cars. We don't safe if we drive on the roads. And they've already evicted 60 Palestinian communities completely from their land in the West Bank. In addition to ethnically cleansing 50,000 other people who were living in the refugee camps of Tulkarem and Jenin. That's the reality. And that's why it's awful. And they put, of course, the Palestinian side, in this case Hamas, in a very difficult position. If you accept this horrible plan, you are doomed. If you don't accept it, you are also doomed. And that's why there has to be better understanding of what's happening and better understanding of how the United States of America is really becoming not only complicit with these war crimes, but actually a participant in the war crimes that are happening. The strangest thing, I will finish now, the strangest thing I heard was Mr. Trump saying that if Palestinians don't accept this plan, he will give free hand to Netanyahu. He's been giving him free hand and free leg and free everything. Not only free hand, but actually a hand full of weapons, a hand full of explosives. He's just approved another $4 billion of explosives for Israel. So they are so, it is so clear that the problem here is a much bigger problem than just the Israelis attacking Palestinians. On the issue of unity, yes, of course, we need unified Palestinian leadership. This has been my call all the time. And being a party that is independent from both Fatah and Hamas, that allowed us to play the role of a mediator several times, especially when we managed to form the National Unity Government in 2007. A government that was boycotted by the West, although it was unity government. And although it had 90% of all parties elected in the parliament, including Fatah and Hamas. And we will not stop asking or demanding unity. And of course, we have our internal differences. But the best agreement we managed to reach recently after the war started was the Beijing Agreement, which is unfortunately also ignored by the media, ignored by the press, and ignored by many Palestinian political forces. Although it's the best solution to stand up to Trump's plan, the Beijing Agreement is an agreement I personally wrote, drafted, in the presence of all 14 Palestinian parties who all signed it. And that agreement speaks about the establishment of a national consensus government. And in that meeting, Hamas told us they don't want to be in the government and they don't want to be a government. And so the solution was a transitional independent government that would be the government of both West Bank and Gaza. The biggest failure of the Palestinian Authority, that instead of sticking to this agreement, they are allowing now maneuvers that are marginalizing also the Palestinian Authority completely. So the solution to unity, in my opinion, I still believe, is to adopt the Beijing Declaration and try to implement it, because this agreement also speaks about a transitional independent government that will also prepare the ground after the war is over and reconstruction is done, prepare the ground to have free democratic elections. We haven't had elections already for 20 years. Not only because the Palestinian Authority made a huge mistake by canceling the elections in 2021, but also because the United States of America, many countries, I will not go on now and mention them, many countries, and Israel in particular, were against us having democratic free elections. And you know what? I'm almost 99% sure, had we have elections in 2021, we would not have had the 7th of October. Because it would have led to removing the siege on Gaza. And it would have led to a pluralistic democratic system, because according to all the polls, no single party in Palestine can get absolute majority. And that would lead to what I think is the best formula, which is a pluralistic democratic system. So while we struggle against occupation, against genocide, against this terrible injustice, we also struggle for our right of internal democracy, giving the people the right to choose and the right to elect. Thank you.
A round of 3 more. Oh gosh. Ooh, this is rough. Maybe let's take maybe 2. That. Yes. Yes. And then this side. Oh gosh, I hate to be doing this. This gentleman, yeah. And Lenny.
Yes, again. Hi. My question is to Jeremy Corbyn. Having just spoken about leadership in Palestine, can you comment on the leadership of your party with Zara Sultana? And what are the prospects of leadership with Zara Sultana in the UK?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I have a question to Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, and my question is also in relation to your party. As you now build your party with pro-Gaza independents like Zara Sultana, how might a new left-wing platform in the United Kingdom force Keir Starmer's hand on supporting sanctions and boycotts of Israel? Thank you.
Mr. Stan. Partly I've been answered by some of the other questionnaires because I wanted Jeremy, there's a question to Jeremy. The way the debate between yourself and Zara Sultana has been presented in a hostile media in Britain and in the world, as if it's a debate, as if it's a fight over the money and who opens the platforms first and that nonsense. But I think all of us in solidarity with a new initiative like that needs proper information. So if Jeremy could speak about what are the possible healthy strategic differences between yourself and Zara Sultana and the others around her, and what are the possibilities of that uniting so that there actually is a left alternative to the current morass in Britain. Thank you.
It's 3 questions in one, so ask one, get 3. First of all, thanks very much for your questions, and thanks very much for your awareness of the issues surrounding the party. I was keen that there be an alternative voice in politics, and a lot of time was spent discussing issues with an awful lot of people in order to ensure there was a party established that is not a top-down parliamentary-led bureaucratic party, but is actually grassroots-based, informed with the community and involved with the community. And that is the basis on which your party.uk has been set up. And we agreed on we would send out an appeal for membership. Unfortunately, there was a premature appeal sent out, which wasn't terribly helpful. That has then been rowed back on, and then the fundamental appeal went out, and we had a very large number of people sign up for it. There is a process that is now called deliberative assemblies, which are beginning very soon, which we're going all around the country discussing what sort of structure the party would have, what kind of conference it would have, and what kind of leadership structure it would have. And that, to me, is an important way of doing things. The fundamental appeal is, 1, opposing economic injustice and inequality in Britain. That means redistribution of wealth and power, economic strategy that leads to that, a taxation system that taxes corporations and the wealthy. 2, the issues of public ownership and democracy in the economy, including public ownership of water and other industries, and a welfare system that doesn't take money away from those with disabilities, as the government is doing at the moment, and ends the 2-child benefit cap, which keeps a lot of children in poverty. That's a benefit system that only gives benefits to the first 2 children in a large family. Thirdly, environmental sustainability, embracing net zero by 2030. And fourthly, the crucial area on international strategy, opposition to nuclear weapons, and obviously support for the people of Palestine and calling for a ceasefire and a peace process in Ukraine. There are no other policies because there has not been any process yet to develop those policies. There is a great deal of media speculation about the party launch website. Again, there was unfortunately a premature launch in which a number of people signed up. I then asked for this to be taken down and withdrawn, and all of that then transferred, all that information transferred into the yourparty.uk system, which is being done. There is a creation of all kinds of ideas that there's a massive personality battle and struggle going on for control of the party. Wow, that makes the story really interesting, but none of that is based either in reality or in the politics of what we're dealing with, which is mobilizing people to join a new party that will do things very differently. I'm back in Britain on Saturday morning, and I'm speaking at rallies all over the country, and Zara and I are jointly speaking at a big rally in Liverpool next week, where we will be hopefully having, well, it's already absolutely sold out. The venue has been, as all of them are, and we're determined that our conference in November will be both big and democratic, but actually forming a new party with no existing culture or structure is actually quite difficult, because how do you define rules when you've got no basis on which to build the rules, because you don't have a membership on which to do it? So it is complicated, hence these deliberative meetings in which we will ask people to put their views forward for the conference itself, and then we are proposing a system called sortation, which will mean that delegates will be selected randomly amongst the entire membership of the party from each district where a party has been set up and invited to come to conference. So that means that a group of people who may know each other very well and be very influential and take over an operation locally very quickly won't necessarily have that effect, because they'll be able to put forward their views supported by others. Somebody else may well end up being the delegate. It's not been done before. Some people think it's a bit random, and there's also a poll going on about the name of the party. Your party came up in a discussion in my office, and somebody said, well, what do you think it should be? And lots of fairly random names came up: the Peter Pan Party, the Robin Hood Party, the No Name Party, the Rename Party. There was all kinds of things. And I said, well, it's really your party. And that's it. That's the one we'll go for. So there's a vote being taken on that. I'm very excited about it. We will be formed, we will be strong, we will be big, we'll be working closely with existing independent groups around the country, of which there are a lot, broadly of the left, who are often councillors in different parts of the country. We're working with all of them, obviously working with trade unions and trade union membership. We haven't yet, I personally haven't even come to a view on it, about how the trade union relationship should be, whether it's an affiliated block vote structure or membership structure, whatever. I haven't actually completely made up my mind on that. All I do know is that there's got to be a lot of working class trade union involvement in the party for it to be successful, and that's the area we're working on. So if you could turn your attention away from the very interesting stories that are circulating, and instead turn your attention towards the politics of the situation and the determination that will challenge neoliberal economics, will challenge the war economy, will challenge the poverty of children, and will be a voice with the left across Europe to defeat the far right and their ghastly, dangerous message of blaming refugees for the problems created by free market economics. That's what we're determined to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to take one more round of 3 questions. Okay, so I've got 1 hand over there, 2 there, and 3 over there. So who's doing mics? Oh, 4. Can we just take a mic to, yeah. Just put your hand up again. Richie, just, yeah. The person in the black there at the back, sorry, Richie. Then,
Hi, my question is for Dr. Barghouti. You said earlier that you support the idea of a single state. And I was wondering if that's a popular sentiment across Palestine, and how do you envision that being brought to fruition given the decades of suffering that Palestinians have had to endure under Israeli occupation and apartheid, and now the genocide, and also given the fact that most Israelis, and I think you quoted 90% of the population, support the current genocide and are against a Palestinian state?
Thank you. And just over there, please, Richie.
This may be regarded as a naive question. Why is it that Israel is so powerful? I think some of the speakers alluded to it, but I think we need to look at that. And why is it that people vote for an Abbas?
Thank you to the panelists for a very informative discussion. I'm not sure who my question is addressed at. Perhaps one of the chairs, Prof. Swoletu, might be able to provide some input on this. It's with respect to the peace plan. What legitimacy does a peace plan have if it's being tabled by two co-perpetrators of a genocide in terms of international law? What does this say about the system, the rules-based system that we currently think we're subscribed to? And given its many failures, how do you envision a way forward?
Sorry. Okay, yes, one more.
Thanks, Dr. Bogadi. I can listen to you for hours, and I'm sure all of us here. You know, you make a very important point around sanctions and boycotts. Economic sanctions, cultural sanctions, and sporting sanctions. Have you guys interacted with the South African government, particularly on those 3 points, making the point that we need to institute those sanctions against Israel? The same goes for Jeremy. The appeal would be that you drive such a campaign in the UK and in Europe. Forget everything else. Just focus on economic, cultural, and sporting sanctions against Israel, because those sanctions made a huge impact in South Africa against apartheid. Then just for the museum person, it was interesting to hear about the Palestinian Museum here in Cape Town. Might be interesting if you popularize it some more so that more people get to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. These are very good questions. About the one-state solution and how do we get there? Look, the idea here is not only about the form of the state, whether it will be 2 states or 1 state or federal state or co-federal state. There are so many ideas that are thrown. But to be honest with you, peace will prevail only if we dismantle this settler colonial system. That's the basic thing, you know. And that's why when we speak about one democratic state, we also speak about dismantling the settler colonial system, which is a bad system for all of us. Exactly like happened here in South Africa. Everything started in the negotiations with one very basic principle that the leaders of South Africa and Mandela in particular were not ready to give up, which is 1 person, 1 vote. And in our case, it's the same. Not only 1 person, 1 vote, but more than that, no place for one side oppressing the other, occupying the other, or practicing discrimination against the other. The mistake of Oslo agreement, and allow me to be self-critical now of Palestinian systems, the biggest mistake of Oslo agreement is that they did not stick to the same principle that Mandela stuck to, and allowed a transitional agreement without insisting on two things we were demanding, because I was in the official delegation, not Oslo delegation. That happened from behind our back. But we were insisting with people like Haidar Abdeshafi at the time that no agreement would be signed without first total and complete freeze of all settlement activities. They ignored that. And they agreed on a transitional agreement without the end result, knowing the end result. I don't mind stages, but there has to be a clear end. In your case, it was one person, one vote. And that's what we didn't have before, and that's what we should have in the future. On the second question, why Israel is so powerful? That needs a whole lecture. But quickly, first, they are very well organized. Very well organized. The Zionist movement is very well organized. And it is really impressive to see how well organized. I remember, by the way, quickly also, I don't want to take your time. The first time I visited the United States was in 1988, during the first Intifada. And we went on giving lectures in all more important medical schools in the United States. 46 lectures in 1 month. And it introduced me to the United States. But what I discovered from the first lecture, we had people in the audience asking specific questions. The second lecture, it was the same questions from other people. The third lecture, it was the same questions. At the end, it became a joke because we would answer the questions before they asked them. But it showed you how organized they were. They received the same questions, they asked the same questions, and I bet you the questions they would ask here or the issue they will raise here in South Africa will be the same in Canada and the same in Mexico. It's well-organized movement, one. Second, it is an alliance with the most horrible imperialist power in this world. Why would they attack Egypt in 1956 with Britain and France at the time? Because they were protecting the imperialist interests of Britain and France against the Algerian Revolution and against the nationalization of the Suez Canal, etc., etc. So, and they are very good at moving alliances. When it failed in 1956, they moved all their alliance to the United States of America because it's the most powerful country. And don't think they are not trying now to establish strong links with China, by the way. So these are all factors that contribute. But there is another factor, which is the weakness of other people and the weakness of those who should be responding to the conspiracies they are subjected to. But I am telling you, yes, Israel is very powerful. Yes, it has 200 nuclear heads. Some of them were, by the way, taken from here, from South Africa. Because, you know, there was nuclear cooperation between Israel and South Africa. And when I was Minister of Information, I had in my office a sign of a phrase said by the Prime Minister of the apartheid system in South Africa, which said Israel is like South Africa and apartheid too. So there was this cooperation. They have nuclear heads. They have the most powerful army in the area. But believe me, they have very big weakness. And that weakness is what they try to hide all the time. And look, they defeated 3 Arab parties, 3 Arab armies in 3 days in 1967. They've been fighting for 2 years against what? A small resistance group, and they are failing to achieve what they want. So that's why it's not that strong. And we should know what are the elements of weakness and what are the elements of power here. The next question is about what we should do with this agreement. For me, the most important immediate tasks are two things. One, stop the genocide in Gaza at any cost and prevent the ethnic cleansing of the population of Gaza. Only 3 weeks ago, I had to go to Indonesia to prevent a plan to transfer 200,000 Palestinians from Gaza to Indonesia. And I think we managed to stop that. So prevent the ethnic cleansing, stop the genocidal war. But this is a long struggle. After that, after the war stops, I hope, after even the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, we still have a long way of struggle, because at the end of the day, what we want is not just the end of the war. We want freedom. We want real freedom for all Palestinians, and we want to practice our right of self-determination. Last question about sanctions. Yes, we speak to the South African government, and I must say we appreciate very much the South African government stand in the International Court of Justice. We do appreciate what they have done, being in the avant-garde of taking that case, and in the avant-garde of also supporting our case in the International Criminal Court. But we also, I personally was surprised to know how much there is economic relations between South Africa and that's why we will speak to the government, but we will also speak to the South African people, because you have a say in the matter. Thank you.
I'm going to answer the museum question, but also there was a question there of what South African government can do and would like to do. And I worked with the South African government for 3 years, 2015 to 2018, under the governor of Ibrahim, and maybe his daughter is here, Sarah, and with Roof Mayor. Probably everyone knows Roof Mayor. And we worked for 3 years together to unify the Palestinian Front. And the thesis of Comrade Ibrahim was that South Africans united. 5 years later, they were liberated. So the first step is united. And for us, then we held like 2 long seminars, 7-day seminar here in Bushendal, in Stellenbosch, with the Palestinian leadership from the Green Line, Israel, which they were excluded from Oslo completely, and with the Gaza and with Fatah. It was the first meeting since 1988, and that happened in 2016. But now the government of South Africa says it's not the right time, and hopefully the right time will come, and South African government will play a role in uniting the Palestinian Front. On the issue of the Palestine Museum in Cape Town, the museum was funded by Anwar Nanke's family, Allah yarhamu. And actually, in 2015, I walked out from that responsibility. It was my choice. I fell out with Dr. Anwar. No problem with that. And unfortunately, then he passed away during COVID. And his children sold the building. So, but they now speaking about, they have a group that they try to communicate the idea. But I'm not following it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Briefly on the point about further action to be taken and the cultural and sporting boycott issue, I think is very important. The campaign for boycotting South Africa during apartheid was important and could be quite effective in places because it could mobilize people to understand why they shouldn't be buying South African goods. So you could go to any supermarket, give out pamphlets outside saying don't buy South African goods. And then people would say, well, why shouldn't I? Then you get into a discussion and an explanation about it. So it becomes a point of interaction and a point of contact. And I've never forgotten being bitterly told off by my mum because she sent me off to get some fruit and I hadn't checked the labels properly. And I came back with some South African oranges and we lived a few miles away from the shop and I'd cycled there in the rain. So I was sent back to the shop in the rain with the oranges and told the shopkeeper, my mum says you're not to stock these things anymore, and handed them all back. So it was a lesson to me, read the label. But it did have an effect. And also the boycotting of Barclays Bank, particularly by student unions and others, had an effect. It wasn't the crucial effect in bringing the end of apartheid by any manner of means. We all know that. But it helped to build up that sense of world and global solidarity on it. And so the case of Israeli goods at the moment, there is significant moves to boycott Israeli goods. And indeed the Co-op, which is a very large retailer in Britain, Co-op shops all over the country, and Co-op other undertakings as well, on a members' vote, and there are millions of people who are members of the Co-op. On a members' vote, I don't know how many actually took part, there was a vote taken that the Co-op should not stock or trade any Israeli products whatsoever from now on, and that was carried, and that was an important motion to put forward. The question of the sporting boycott is a very important one, and I remember campaigning against the Springbok tour in the 60s, and then the Stop the 70 tour, and then eventually we got the isolation of South Africa, and that had a big effect where there was a sporting boycott. Again, it didn't make economically much difference to South Africa, but the psyche of the country, I believe, and everybody's confirmed this to me, was really seriously affected by the idea we, South Africa, cannot go to the Olympics, cannot go here, cannot go there. We need to do the same with Israel. And so my friend Ayub Khan, who's one of the Independent Alliance group of MPs who represents Birmingham Perry Bar, along with my other colleagues Adnan Hussain and Iqbal Mohammed and Zara, of course, and myself, and Shaukat Adam have raised the issues in Parliament, and there's going to be a football match between Aston Villa and Maccabi Haifa in November in Birmingham. There's already a big campaign to have the match cancelled. There's already a big campaign to say to Aston Villa they should refuse to play with them, and that has been amplified by Eric Cantona speaking at this huge event we had for Palestine last week in Wembley, when he spoke brilliantly, calling for a complete boycott of all Israeli sport and that all footballers should refuse to play against Israeli national sides or Israeli club sides, and also that Israel shouldn't be allowed to play in the European Football Association competitions. Fairly obviously, because it's not in Europe, would be one case, but there's also the question of their general behaviour. So we are pushing very hard on that, and I think it's beginning to have quite a big effect. And again, you then get through to a whole new demographic. So you go to a football ground and give out leaflets saying, don't play with apartheid, don't play with Israeli teams. Don't run away with the idea that everybody that goes to every sporting match is fully aware of everything going on in the world. They're not. But you give them that, they say, well, why not? You're then into a conversation. You're then into bringing a whole new demographic of people into the campaign in support of the rights of the Palestinian people. And there's no finer club at doing it than Celtic in Glasgow, who they were told by the management of Celtic not to show Palestinian flags anymore at matches because some people found it offensive. The next match, every single supporter waved a Palestinian flag. You couldn't see anything except Palestinian flags. Well done, Celtic supporters.
So Yusuf is standing there saying, I must move with the meeting. So I just want to, first of all, ask for another hand of applause for our incredible speakers, Anif, Mustafa, and Jeremy. And Yusuf, I'm going to say two sentences. I think listening this evening, you have a sense of the paradox of the incredible, almost insurmountable task that we need a shift of the geopolitical and economic forces in the world in order to achieve a freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. And at the same time, the paradox is, I think, that right here and now, there is a tremendous amount of work that can be done. And we have to hold both of those truths in our hands as we move forward. And the three things I'm taking from this meeting is we need to build a united left in South Africa. We need to listen to what is coming out of Palestine, what is coming out of the UK, and we need to start to seriously engage with what that means for us here in our country in South Africa. The second thing that I'm taking out is that every one of us must find in our own spheres of influence where our solidarity work lies. So if it's in the health sphere, what does that look like in real and practical terms for the Palestinian people? And the third thing I think here, sitting in the University of Cape Town venue that we are in, is to remember that right here there have been battles around an academic boycott of Israel and Israeli universities, and that battle has been partially won, but it is constantly under attack and is continually challenged by certain forces within the university. And that one of the things we as a university community need to do is to mobilize and galvanize and organize ourselves for a full academic boycott of Israeli universities. Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief. I'd like to thank Mustafa Barghouti, Jeremy Corbyn, and Anis Daragma for gracing us with their presence. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this very, very important conversation. I think that without you being here and without you taking part of this, this certainly would not be possible. And I'd like to thank the School of Education for providing us with this amazing venue. I think it is a very, very impressive forum that makes all of this possible. So thanks for everyone. And then the most important thing is that there is food and water upstairs. And so hang around and, feel free, mingle, have more conversation, and let's spread the love. Thank you very much.
Nice to do. Sorry. Getting old.
Yeah.
No, you're not getting old.
I can relate.
No. Talking 20 years.
Asking about that. Are you
Right now.